Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Free Friday Tidbit. Now, this morning I wanted to break from my tradition of presenting something about the neurobehavioral model per se, and just talk to you about why I'm so passionate about fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, as well as other causes of neurodiversity, but particularly FASD, or fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. And that's because it is the hidden epidemic in our society, actually worldwide. So in our country, in the United States, we look at the fact that 86% of American adults drink alcohol or alcoholic beverages, right? And we have 45% of our pregnancies in this country are unplanned. That means that between 39% and 86% of all babies in this country are prenatally exposed to alcohol. Now, alcohol is one of 50,000 teratogens, right? Which is something that affects the developing fetus and changes it, right? But it is even more dangerous than heroin or methamphetamines. And I'm not saying that to give anyone permission to go out and use illegal drugs, not at all. But it is more dangerous because the molecule, the alcohol molecule, is smaller than the molecules of these other substances. And it not only goes through the placenta, but it also goes through the blood-brain barrier in the baby. And one way of describing what it does to the brain is it turns it into Swiss cheese. When those alcohol molecules are finally metabolized, they leave holes, which is why the way the brain is supposed to develop its wiring, why it develops detours, right? In order to get from point A to point B, it can't jump across space. Right? So it is very dangerous to each next generation. And there are a lot of myths about FASD and what it does and doesn't do, right? There's one myth that basically says if you have FASD, then you're intellectually compromised, similarly to mental retardation, which I hate that term. But here's the reality. IQ tests range from 20, which is significantly, profoundly impaired, to 130, which is well above average. Okay? And everywhere in between. So a lot of our developmental agencies, they don't provide services to anyone whose IQ is above 75 because of the assumption that they're smart enough to be able to make it in life. But intelligence is not the only area of brain function that takes a hit, right? All those skills that underline adaptive functioning or the ability to respond to the world, those also take a hit. And they're also damaged, but they're not reflected in IQ scores. So I also wanted to point out that yes, FASD is the leading cause of intellectual disabilities and learning disabilities and developmental disabilities in the Western world. And actually in the world, totally in the world. It's also the #1 cause of birth defects in the Western world, because alcohol is a whole body diagnosis. There are 428 conditions that affect every body system that we have that have a higher prevalence among those of us with fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, right? That's pretty important to know. It is a medical diagnosis. And even though we've known, and let me say something else about the prevalence. There's another myth that says if you don't have the face, you don't have it, don't worry about it. There's actually several different diagnoses under the FASD umbrella. right? One of those, fetal alcohol syndrome, has facial changes, right? And one of the myths is that if you have the facial changes, you have the most severe form of FASD, right? Because it's the complete picture of it, because it has the facial features. But that's not at all remotely true. All it means, if you have the facial features, is that the mom drank between days 17 and 21, because those are the days that the face was being formed in the womb. Okay, does that make sense? Alcohol will impact any body system that is being formed or developed at the time of exposure. So the more often alcohol is consumed, the more damage is done to more and more systems of the developing body and brain. All right, important stuff to know. And it's actually more severe in cases where there are no facial changes, because if you have facial features, it's much more readily identified, diagnosed, and services provided. But if you don't have the facial features, it stays hidden much longer. And those individuals get blamed and shamed and even punished for not being able to do things they're expected to do, or for doing things that they can't control, because it's biologically wired, right? Important stuff. Now, here's the thing. As of 2015, well, first, let me give you the stats, right? According to Dr. May, in 2015, well, no, that's when he said it's the leading cause of birth defects, developmental and learning disabilities. But according to Dr. May, in the general population, FASD, or prenatal exposure to alcohol, affects up to 5% of the general population. That's 1 in 20 kids. That means a minimum of 1 child in every classroom, every Sunday school class, every Girl Scout or Boy Scout troop, every dance class, right? And easily within every family system. But it also means if you have a typical street, you've got several. Okay? That means everybody alive knows multiple people that are affected by prenatal alcohol exposure. Now, we've known about FAS, or fetal alcohol syndrome, which is, remember, the one with the facial changes, for 50 years now, since 1973, when Dr. Kenneth Jones discovered it, right? And he was working up in Seattle, I believe, right? And yet, as of 2015, Dr. May found that between 90 and 95% of FASD cases, it remains undiagnosed. So let's take a look at the population stats, right? The estimated census in 2022 says that there are, I can't remember the stats for how many adults there are, but if we multiply that times 5%, it's 16.6 plus million adults walking around the US that are affected by prenatal alcohol exposure. And if you multiply that times 90 or 95%, that's a whole lot of people who have no understanding that that's why their life has been challenging. And that's who I want to reach. Those are the people like myself for whom I am writing my book. It's called Sip by Sip, Candid Conversations of Those Diagnosed with FASD as Adults. And it's going to be released in September. I'm going to very soon, by no later than June, I'm going to be taking orders for the pre-release sales, right? I want to reach all those adults out there who don't understand the reason why they've never felt like they fit in. the reason for why perhaps they were bullied as a kid, right? The reason for why they self-medicated with addictive substances or behaviors, the reason why they've struggled to maintain a steady job, the reason why they've struggled to maintain a healthy and wonderful relationship with someone significant whom they can love deeply and who will love them back, right? The implications of FASD are huge. They affect all aspects of our lives, but they affect everybody differently, depending on the timing of exposure, the amount or the intensity of the dose, right? Social drinkers have children with FASD all the time. They're less impacted than the children of alcoholics, simply because of the timing and the dosing of the alcohol exposure. But it doesn't matter. There is no safe time to drink during pregnancy. Drink till it's pink, that's garbage, because by then the damage is done. Right? You know, as working in child welfare for the past almost quarter of a century, I watch kids fall through the cracks and become those terrible statistics that Dr. Google will spit out if you research FASD, right? The repeat recidivism in prison, juvenile justice, homelessness, suicide. Yeah, all those things can happen if no one figures out that's what's going on and puts supports in place. Because what we're talking about are brain injuries, right? Brain damage. And that's why I keep saying it's not going to respond as you hope it would to traditional parenting techniques, because there is no punishment, there is no bribe or reward that will undo brain damage. The trick is figuring out exactly how someone was impacted and putting accommodations into place, workarounds, to give them support in the areas that they need it so that they can succeed, so that they can experience success and have the confidence to grow and stretch and continue in their development. Right? There's a lot of hope, but it all begins with identification. That's my mission. That's my mission, to change the way that the world looks at behavior and what it means, so that instead of expecting compliance from people, we can focus instead on, why is something difficult for them? Is it something about their brain that keeps them from being successful in doing something? And if it is, let's put some supports in place so that it's possible, right? I work with parents for children, very important. And how could I not, after spending nearly a quarter century in child welfare? But I also work with adults. I began my career in addictions. I understand those struggles, but I also understand it's more than just a disease, right? It's a function of their own, in most cases, their own damages from their own exposures, right? So if you're interested in exploring this anymore, reach out to me. You can reach me at contact@patriciacasper.com. And you can also find me on Facebook. It's Patricia Casper Training Services. If you want to put something in the URL bar, the search bar, it's facebook.com/we are all diamonds in the rough, with a dot between each word. Okay, you can join one of my groups. So I will put all the hashtags in there later on. I've got to go transport some kids for my foster care job, but I'll be back to put some links in the comment section. But thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. thank you for being curious and wanting to understand more, and to taking that first step and realizing how big of a problem this is. It is the hidden epidemic. And I'm Patty Casper, your FASD coach. Bye for now.